Hey friends, it's Cassie. Welcome back for another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be featuring the Tailored Expressions Field Notes Kit. I am aware that this is sold out as of now, but let me just go ahead and show you what came in the kit. Hopefully, even though this is sold out, it will give you some ideas as to other ways you can use some of the products that you have in your stash. So this one has the die, it has the Field Notes Botanicals stamp set, and then we have a background set, and then just the field notes itself. So Sketchbook Florals is where we're starting. I'm going to pull out some 100% cotton paper. This is Arch's cold press watercolor paper. This actually is way better for you watercoloring. It's more expensive for sure, but 100% cotton is definitely the way to go. And I can't really explain why, other than if you tried it, you would know. So I'm going to cut this down. I'm just cutting down some panels. So I've got 4.5 inches by, or 4.25 inches by 5.5 inches. And then I have some like square pieces that will fit what I'm going to stamp. I'm going to pull out the guts of my Misty, and I'm going to stamp with these beautiful red rubber stamps. I'm going to ink these up with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And actually, if I had this to do again, I would not stamp it with this particular ink. This ink works well for watercoloring if you emboss it, but at least, and maybe it was just the paper I was using, I was having a hard time getting this to actually dry. It didn't really affect any of the watercoloring itself, but when I would rub my hand across it, you could tell. I'm going to be using the Nuvo watercolor pencils. These are fairly new to me. They're Pastel Highlights is this particular tin. Comes in several different colors, and I showed these in a haul video not too long ago. And I'm finally getting a chance to really paint with them, and I will tell you that these are wonderful. They are highly pigmented and just a lot of fun. So as a matter of fact, as I am filming this, I went ahead and ordered a couple of the other tins. So yeah, they're on sale right now. I think through today over on the Tonic page. So I will have those linked down below. It's a bundle, and yeah, if you can get your hands on these and you like watercolor mediums, or you're in the, you've been thinking about it, these are fantastic. What I did with these is I went ahead and started with that purple color. And I just put down a little bit of the color, just coloring it in. I'm not filling it in all the way, just putting down the color where I'd like it to be the darkest. And then I'm bringing in a water brush and I am blending that color out. And you'll notice obviously there's some lighter areas and some darker areas. And as I've always said with watercolor, the best way to do it is to work in layers. I also have talked about, or no, maybe I didn't talk about it, but there are a couple different ways that you can use these watercolor pencils. You can go directly to the paper, which is what I started with. And then I am going to take my water brush and take it from the pencil, which gets you a lot of color. So as you can see, I'm getting a lot of color just by taking my water brush and picking up some of the color from the pencil. And I have found that that is a super fun way to just add a lot more texture and a little bit deeper color. So I like to start with colorings directly with the pencil and then come in by bringing my watercolor or my water brush onto the watercolor pencil itself. So I'm just going to keep doing that. And I'm not going to show you all the coloring of all the images because there's a lot, and I have 4 cards that I want to share with you today, and that would just make this a super long video. So we are going to just limit it to this one flower. And because I'm limited on colors, I'm having to be a little bit creative with it, and well, that's what we're doing here anyways, being creative, right? So I've slapped down this green color. I'm going to drag that out with my water brush, and what you do want to do when you're working in layers is definitely heat set in between, or if you have an opportunity to walk away to let it dry, that's the best way to do it. So I'm usually heat setting in between layers, and then I'm going to bring in a little bit more of the green, and this is perfectly fine. You could leave it this way. I am going to come in with another color later though. To be creative with your colors, it's a good idea to know some color theory, and we'll talk about that here in a second when I go on to the yellow. So I'm going to put down some yellow for starters, and I'll blend out that color like I did with everything else. But if you know your color theory, because I really did want that to be a little bit more brown or gray colored, darker, purple and yellow are complementary colors. So when you mix them, they give you almost like a brown or a gray. I combined the two. They give you kind of like a brown gray color, and that's sort of what I was going for. I'm going to bring in a lighter blue for my green. Those are not complementary colors. I just wanted to add a little bit of blue to that, just to change up the color. And then I will bring in the matching dye, and I'll run those through my die cutting machine. As you can see, I have I stamped those out 2 times each and colored all of those using those Nuvo watercolor pencils. I also stamped out some of the sentiments because in that die set there is a tag. For our first card, I am going to use the stencils. So this stencil's cool. It does have lines on the outside so you can line up your A2 size card perfectly. And then I'll just tape that down on the back. And I'm going to bring in the smaller stencil because I want to do a little bit of color blocking. And I'll just tape those down using some purple tape. I have some Distress ink colors that I have pulled out. That first one is Worn Lipstick, and my yellow is the Scattered Straw. I'm going to bring in some Trinity Stamps brushes that I have and blend that color out, trying to stick to the darker areas or on the edges. So I'll just keep blending that color all along those edges. And I'll pull that back and discover that I don't really have any color in the center, so it's easy to line it right back up, which is what I'm doing. And then I'll put just a little bit of that color right in the center so that I have something. I'm going to go up to the upper left-hand corner and do the same sort of thing. The color will overlap a little bit, and that'll come in really cool when we bring in the Scattered Straw, but for now, we're just going to do the exact same thing that we did down in that lower right-hand corner. I do apologize that my camera keeps going in and out. I think it's because the blender brush is moving so quickly. It's having a hard time focusing, so I do apologize for that. But now we're going to move on to the Scattered Straw, so I'll grab a different blender brush. I do happen to have a blender brush for each color family. I have a video coming out later this week that talks a little bit more about blender brushes and how to clean them and the different types that there are, so stay tuned for that. So I'll bring in that Scattered Straw and do the exact same thing, and you'll notice that where it overlaps the Worn Lipstick, you're getting an orange, which is so cool. So I'll tape this down and do the exact same thing here in the bottom left-hand corner that I did across the whole thing. And this is fun, and I like that it'll give you options. So you may not like how I lined up the rectangles, but you can do it a totally different way if you wanted. You could, go diagonal. That'd be cool, and get those colors to blend, and that'd be kind of fun. So here's our background. I decide I need a little bit of splatter, so I'm going to bring in the Brutus Monroe Pearl Aqua Pigments. It's mostly just clear shimmer, and I'm going to splatter that all over that background just with a dry small paintbrush that I have. And then I'll pull that out and let you see it, but I am going to heat set that before I move on too much. But take a look at all that shimmer. It's so pretty and it's subtle. So we'll heat set that. And then you'll notice that I have a pink flower. That's the one I've chosen. But before I attach it, I am going to trim down my card panel because my card base is going to be some lunch bag cardstock by Brutus Monroe. This is more of a craft color. And I've cut that down to be 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and I'm going to score it at 4 1/4. So this will be a side folding A2 size card. And then I just like the way that looks. I brought in some linen twine that I've had for forever and a day. And I do apologize. I think I do make another bow later on and actually show you how to do it. But I just went ahead and had a bow ready. And I'm going to attach some foam tape to the back of my flower. I am going to leave a small section because I want to wrap some of that twine around it so that it looks like my little tag is attached to the flower. So you'll notice that I don't put foam tape all over that back. There's a small gap there. And so I'll peel off this release paper, and then I'll attach that right down to the front of my card. And then I'll grab that twine that I had and I'll stick that through where the gap was. And then kind of gauge where I want my tag to be, and I'll have to cut off some of that excess twine. But I'm gonna just, instead of attaching that down with glue or anything, I'm going to peel off the release paper on my tag and stick it down that way. So it looks like that's attached, especially once I put the bow on, which I'll just put on with a little bit of liquid glue. So it's a very simple card, really, used for any kind of occasion, just about. Just says friend. And then I'll attach this to the front of my card base. And then on the inside of that card, I'm only going to stamp one of the sentiments from one of the sets. It just says thinking of you. And then I'll line that up fairly straight on that block, and then we'll stamp that down using some Raven Detail ink on the inside of the card. And that's actually going to finish off our first card. So very fun. Love those colors. And we'll get ready to move on to our second card. For card number 2, I want a little bit of an ombre feel to this one, so I do have some more of that watercolor paper. I'm going to use the scattered straw along with a blending brush, and I'm going to bring it in from that right-hand side, just bringing it across until it softens out into the white space, and then I'll just, just keep increasing the intensity of the scattered straw right there on that edge. And then when I'm happy with that, we'll clean up our mess, and we're going to do a little bit of stamping for that background. So what makes this field notes so cool is that you can use a lot of these backgrounds. And you know what, honestly, you can use just about any backgrounds you have just to kind of enhance the background. And that's what I'm doing with that one background stamp there. I just randomly stamped some of the scattered straw in there and then pressed my paper into it. I don't need it to be perfect. In fact, I don't want it to be perfect. And if I did, I wouldn't have used the scattered straw distress ink to begin with, because that stuff's not formulated for actual stamping. But I like the way the background is. So I'll grab some of the other background stamps from this Field Note stamp set, and I'm going to stamp those using some Grrr ink by Simon Hurley. Just adds a little bit more extra interest to the background. And then we're going to put our panel into our Mini Misty, and I'm going to line up the sentiment that I wanted to grab. That one's from the Field Note stamp set as well. So my biggest issue with red rubbers, obviously you can't see through them, so trying to get them straight and making sure that they're lined up. This is, for me, why a Misty is so important, or a stamp positioning tool. So I made sure that it was lined up with the grid, and it's also nice because this way I can ink up my stamp a second time and then stamp it down. So then we'll stamp on the inside. I'm going to stamp Thinking of You again. I tend to need cards like that and Thank You the most. So that's what I tend to make. What kind of cards do you guys need the most? It makes me curious. All right, I do want to do a little more stamping other than just the Thinking of You, even though that works. We're going to bring in the Misty again. And this time we're going to flip it because I want to use the stamp that I used on the outside, on the inside in a few spots. So I'm going to ink that up with that Grrr ink one more time. And this way we'll just have some flowers on the bottom on the inside. I'll pick it up and move it. I'm not obviously worried about cleaning off my stamp in between, mostly because this is a sketchy type flower anyway, so if the lines are a little bit blurred, it's not going to bother me too much. And it is, it's not like I'm coloring them in, it's just for a background. I could write over that very, very easily. And then we'll take our panel and attach it to the front of our card base, which is another one of those lunch bag card bases. I had trimmed this down just a tiny bit to leave a little bit of that lunch bag showing through, and I had put some foam tape on the back of my flower again. I do end up having a little bit of problem with this foam tape, not just with the release paper there, but I attach it down to the front. I don't know if it's because the ink is still a little bit wet or if I manhandled that foam tape too much, but this isn't sticking. So I'm going to just take my Nuvo Deluxe Liquid Glue, and I'm just going to put it all over that foam tape. So if you find that that happens, don't worry, you can fix it. This is how I'm going to do it. And then we'll let that dry for a second. I'm not going to add any other embellishments. That's actually going to finish it off. So I like how that one turned out as well. All right, card number 3 is going to be a slim line. You knew it was coming. You knew it. So I've cut this down to 7.5 inches by 7 inches by 8.5 inches, and I am scoring it at 3.5 inches. And this is just some more watercolor cardstock. This is not actually the cold press though. This is not the 100% cotton. This is just some other that I had in my stash. And now I'm going to take the stencil and I'm going to line up my card base on the stencil. I'm using the lines that are on this and I'm just kind of centering that, and then I'm going to tack that down with a little bit of purple tape. And I'll grab out some Remember Me ink by Simon Hurley, and then I'll sponge that through the stencil. Sorry that my camera is on the fritz every time I do some ink blending. That just drives me crazy. But for whatever reason, it just has a hard time focusing. It's probably because I'm just moving so fast. I am intensifying the color on the edges. I love that look. It gives that, I don't know, like it's fading out in the background. It's so cool, kind of spotlighting. And then I'm going to bring in that background stamp again. We're going to ink that up with the Remember Me, just part of it. And then I will flip over my card panel with the stencil still attached. And then I'm just going to press, press, press and hope that I get a good impression. And it turns out that I do. So I'll flip that over and voila, love it. And it's even fairly straight. So I'll peel that off, and the stencil's easily cleaned, and we can put that away. For my sentiment, I have some Raven cardstock by Brutus Monroe. I'm going to use a powder bag over the top of that, ink the sentiment up with some embossing ink, try to center that, stamp it out, and cover that with some Alabaster embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. And then I'll heat set that till that is smooth and melted. And don't worry about that residue. When everything is completely cool and I've cleaned up everything, I can take a microfiber cloth and wipe that away. Or even your hand will work as well. So I'll pull in my guillotine trimmer and we'll trim this down, just lining everything up next to the clear see-through holder. And then I'm going to cover both flowers that I've decided to use with some foam tape. And then I'll even put some foam tape right on the card base. This is the best way I have found, at least for me, to attach my sentiments. So that goes all the way across the card. And I went ahead and attached that so I knew where to put my flowers. Peel off the release paper on both of those. I'm going to have to trim down this flower just a little bit. Peel off its release paper, and then I can just pop that down, and I'll peel off the release paper on the one that's on the card base, and then this way I can use my glass mat and then just try to center the sentiment as best I can. And then we will have a lot of excess, but we can easily trim that off, save that for other projects. And then I do need to do a little stamping in the inside, so I'll grab that Remember Me one more time, along with the flowers that I went ahead and used. Because this is a thank you card, I'm assuming I may have lots to thank whoever I'm sending this to with. So I'm leaving plenty of room, and you can always write over the stamping just because, this is why I like to choose some subtle colors. And I'll stamp both of the flowers in there a few times. But we got to do it in odds, so I will stamp it one more time sort of in the center there, just kind of hanging out in the bottom. And that's going to finish off our third card. You knew I had to do a slimline, and I really love these colors. For card number 4, we're going to do a little bit of watercoloring on the background. This is some more of that watercolor paper. I'm going to put down some clean water first with a bigger brush. And then I'm just going to take some of that scattered straw and put that on the background, just trying to be kind of random with it, intensifying the color in some areas. I want this to look almost like it was spilled on there, and so I'll just keep working that color. And my brush and my water weren't as clean as I thought they were, so there's a little tint of blue, but hey, creativity, that's how it is sometimes. I'll keep moving that color along until I'm happy with how it looks. Trying to keep it as organic looking as it possibly can be. And then when I'm happy with that, I'm going to heat set that till that is dry, because you can't stamp on that if it's wet. So we'll just dry that with our heat tool. And when that's all good and dry, we're going to move on to doing some background stamping. We're going to use some of those stamps that we've already been using. I'm going to ink those up using some various colors. This first color is some tumbled glass. And I'm just stamping the triangles, or the, I guess they're diamonds, on the background in a few random areas. Then I'm even going to stamp this grid piece on the background as well. Just adds a lot of interest to that. And I think about doing some other ones, and then I finally do end up grabbing the big background eventually. But before I do that, I'll put the calendar off to the side. And I'm just thinking it needed more. So eventually, like I said, I'll grab the big background. I'm going to ink that up with the scattered straw. I wish that I hadn't done this, to be honest with you. I feel like it's just too much. It overpowers some of the other things I stamped on the background, but it's still pretty, and it's not the focal point. It is just the background, so we're going to go with it. Off camera, I stamped and heat embossed the sentiment that says hello there, and then I'm going to trim that down with my guillotine trimmer, and then we're going to start attaching everything with some liquid glue. I will make a bow first, though. So to do that, I just have a little piece of twine, and I'm going to show you here how I do it. I manipulate it back and forth. That's the best way I can tell you to make a bow. You just keep working it until you're happy with it. That's years of bow making right there. But it's pretty simple, so you just keep working it, and then when you're happy and it's nice and tight, you can trim down your edges, your little tails or whatever they are, and then we're going to start attaching things with some liquid glue. I want that little piece of twine to be sticking out of the back, so before I actually attach this flower, I'm going to stick the twine down, and then we'll stick the flower on top. And that way it'll be wrapped around that flower. And then I'll attach the other flower using that same liquid glue. I could have popped these up with some foam tape, but I decided this one was fine to be like this. You don't always have to have foam tape. And then I'll glue down my tag. It says friend, and I'll glue down the bow the exact same way that I did earlier. And then I'll put a stamp block over the top of it just to make sure everything stays put. And then I'll attach my other sentiment down using the same liquid glue and line it up with the grid on the background. Then we can flip that over and we can trim off the excess from that hello there. And this will be ready to be attached to the front of a card base, which is some more of that lunch bag cardstock. So I'll just attach this down using that same liquid glue. And then on the inside, to add a little something, I started off by doing some watermarking, and I actually don't like it. It's very, very subtle, and I just don't like it. It's not enough. So I'm going to bring in that big background stamp, and we're just going to stamp on the edges. So to do this, I will ink up my background, and then I'll wipe the edge a little bit. But before I stamp that down, we're going to make sure that we have it correctly. We want it on the right side. So that way it's very organic looking on the edge. And then we'll do it again. Take my microfiber cloth and wipe that edge a little bit just to soften those edges. I'm going to turn it, and then we'll stamp it on the other side. So then it gives a nice little border on both edges. And that's it. That's going to finish off card number 4. So let's go ahead and take a look at all 4 of the cards that I made for you today. I would love to know what you think. Which cards were your favorite, or which one was your favorite? If you do have a favorite, please leave that in the comment section down below. Like I said, this kit is sold out, but hopefully this will give you some ideas to work with other kits. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.